Wasn't this based off of a William Shakespeare play?
Yeah, it's called A Midsummer Night's Dream. I was in the play in 3rd grade.
What part did you play?
I was a fairy sprite.
What is the play about?
Well, I know a lot about the play, but I feel like we should know more about the guy that wrote it first.
Yeah, that makes sense.
William Shakespeare lived more than 400 years ago. Many records from that time period are lost or never existed in the first place, so there is no guarantee that researchers know everything about his life. He was probably born on April 23, 1564, and baptized in Stratford-upon-Avon, 100 miles northwest of London on April 26, 1564. He was John and Mary Shakespeare's oldest surviving child. Their first 2 children, both girls, did not live beyond infancy. It is stated by many that both of Shakespeare's parents spent very little time on him and more on their social status. William, being the eldest child, grew up as a big brother to 3 younger brothers, Gilbert, Richard, and Edmund, and 2 younger sisters, Anne, who died at age 7, and Joanne. William Shakespeare's father, John, was known as a prosperous businessman. He rose through local offices and made his way to becoming the town bailiff. Mary Shakespeare, William's mother, was probably the one who taught William how to read, being she was the only literate person in the house. Shakespeare's life primarily existed in 2 locations, Stratford and London. William Shakespeare attended the local Stratford Grammar School, King's School, at roughly the age of 6. It is suggested that he attended this school until the age of 15. Shortly after, on November 28, 1582, at age 18, Shakespeare married 26-year-old Anne Hathaway. She was already expecting their first child, Susanna. This was fairly common at this time. Shortly after the couple was married, they had twins, Judith and Hamnet. William Shakespeare worked in London while Anne and his children stayed in Stratford. For the next 7 years after Shakespeare's children were born, we are uncertain as to how he earned a living, when he moved from Stratford, or how he got started in the theater. Shakespeare entered one of his most productive periods around 1595. He wrote many plays, Richard II, Romeo and Juliet, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and The Merchant of Venice. Over the next 2 decades, Shakespeare had multiple roles in the London theater, as an actor, playwright, and a business partner in a major acting company, the Lord Chamberlain's Men, renamed the King's Men in 1603. The majority of William Shakespeare's plays were written during the English Renaissance. By 1597, 15 of the 37 plays Shakespeare wrote had been published. Many of these early works were history and comedy. It was not until his later period, after 1600, that he began to write tragedies and tragic comedies. Church records show that William Shakespeare was interred at Trinity Church on April 25, 1616. The bulk of his possessions were given to his daughter Susanna, as scholars note that Shakespeare left his wife Anne his second best bed. No definitive collection of his works was published until after his death. In 1623, 2 members of William Shakespeare's troupe printed what is now called the First Folio.
We will perform Act 3, Scene 2 of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which Helena and Hermia argue over the shifted interests of Demetrius and Lysander. A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare takes place in Athens, Greece, and centers around a group of 4 teenagers, Hermia, Helena, Demetrius, and Lysander. Lysander is in love with Hermia, but cannot be with her openly because her father wishes her to marry Demetrius. Lysander is later a victim of misapplied magic and falls in love with Helena. Hermia is the daughter of Eugeius and is in love with Lysander, much to her father's disapproval. She is insecure about her short stature in contrast to her childhood friend Helena. Helena is another main character in the play and makes up another point in the love triangle. She was once engaged to and is still in love with Demetrius, who broke off the engagement and expressed his love for Hermia. Demetrius is also a victim of misapplied magic, along with Lysander. At the beginning of the story, Theseus, the Duke of Athens, is planning a festival in celebration of his marriage to his future queen. Eugeius enters with his daughter Hermia and 2 other young men, Demetrius and Lysander. Hermia, who instead of wishing to marry Demetrius, whom her father has chosen for her, wishes instead to wed Lysander. Because of this, Egeus requests of Theseus the right to punish Hermia with death should she refuse his wishes. While Theseus does agree that Hermia should obey her father, he instead suggests that she enter a nunnery or abide by her father's orders to marry Demetrius. Theseus gives Hermia until his wedding date to weigh her options and further warns her of the consequences. Regardless of this, Lysander and Hermia plan to run away together and get married. Hermia makes these plans known to her friend Helena, who tells Demetrius of their plans in hopes of re-establishing their engagement. But the plan backfires when Demetrius follows Hermia and Lysander into the woods, forcing Helena to go after them. Inside the woods is where Tatiana and Oberon, king and queen of the fairies, reside. Having seen Demetrius' cruelty towards Helena, Oberon orders his servant Puck to use a love potion on Demetrius, causing him to fall in love with Helena instead of Hermia. This is where everything starts going downhill for the characters. Puck makes a mistake and instead of using the love potion on Demetrius, mistakenly drugs Lysander instead. Lysander then wakes up and falls deeply in love with Helena. Puck later tries to undo his mistake, but somehow ends up with the tables turned. Both men claim to be in love with Helena, leaving Hermia to believe that Helena has stolen the hearts of both men. This brings us to Act 3, Scene 2, in which Hermia attempts to instigate a fight with Helena over the shifted love of Lysander and Demetrius. Hermia is insecure about her height compared to Helena and believes that was utilized by Helena in order to steal the love of both men from her.
Oh me! You juggler! You canker blossom! You thief of love! What have you come by night and stolen my love's heart from him?
Fine-eyed Faith, have you no modesty, no maiden shame, no touch of bashfulness? What, will you tear impatient answers from my gentle tongue?
You counterfeit, you puppet, you! Puppet? Why so? That way goes the game. Now I perceive that she hath made compare between our statures. She hath urged her height, and with her personage, her tall personage. Her height, forsooth, prevailed with him. And are you grown so high in esteem? Because I am so dwarfish and so low? How low am I? Thou painted maypole, speak, how low am I? I am not yet so low, but my nails can reach unto thine eyes.
I pray you, though you mock me, gentlemen, let her not hurt me. I was never cursed, I have no gift at all in shrewishness, I am a right maid for my cowardice. Let her not strike me. You perhaps may think, because she is something lower than myself, that I can match her.
Lower? Hark again.
Good Hermia, do not be so bitter with me. I evermore did love you, Hermia. Did I ever keep your counsels, never wronged you, save them, in love unto Demetrius? I told him of your stealth unto his wood. He followed you, for love I followed him. But he hath chid me hence and threatened me, to strike me, to spurn me, to kill me too. And now, so you will let me quiet go, to Athens will I bear my folly back, and follow you no further. Let me go, and see how simple and how fond I am.
Why get you gone? Who is't that hinders you?
A foolish heart that I leave here behind.
What, with Lysander?
With Demetrius.
During this scene, while the girls are fighting, Puck, who confuses them using imitated voices, leads Lysander and Demetrius away into the woods. At this point, the audience finds out that the love potion has been used on Tatiana, who awakes to find herself in love with a man that Puck has magically turned into a donkey. This creates another hilarious subplot in itself. Puck eventually fixes his mistakes, and by morning, all has been made well. The four are brought back to Athens to be married. Demetrius now loves Helena, and Lysander once again loves Hermia, so all is right in the world. Puck returns with a final plea for the audience. He asks for forgiveness and urges them to remember it all as a dream.
We chose this section of the play because it demonstrates how positions have been switched. In the beginning of the play, we see that the biggest difference between Hermia and Helena is that Hermia is bold because the man she loves also loves her. In contrast, we see that Helena not only lacks confidence, but also often acts in desperation because the man she loves suddenly rejects her. The two girls are seeing the consequences of Puck meddling in their business. A dominant theme in this play is love, in which Shakespeare returns as a comedy. Shakespeare toys with how people tend to fall for those who seem beautiful to them. The attraction to beauty may appear to be love at its most intense, but Shakespeare focuses in on how it is so much more than that. Another theme that Shakespeare presents throughout the play is the theme of marriage. By the end of Act 4, the triple wedding presents the formal resolution of all romantic problems. Harold Bloom's opinion on the play is what most writers would love to hear. He loved the transformation of beauty that was present throughout the play. He appreciated the balance Shakespeare presented with the Athenians and comedic actors. Bloom also said that he enjoyed the happy irony in the play. This play was nothing like Shakespeare's other plays, and Bloom respected that.
Another review of the play shows a slightly different opinion. After rereading the play, New York Times writer Charles Isherwood takes away from the story a darker view of love, and how each of the romances in the story is shadowed by moments of betrayal, cruelty, and deception. Isherwood also talks about how A Midsummer Night's Dream depicts how love can get oneself into fatal trouble, and that human hearts are fickle and unreasonable. He notices that even the fairies hold inconsistent love that inspires trickery and brutality when it is thwarted. Many examples of this are given throughout the review, demonstrating the darkness found in the love between characters of each subplot. From Titania and Oberon to Theseus and Hippolyta, to the four main characters, Hermia, Helena, Demetrius, and Lysander. Isherwood does acknowledge the fact that some of the cruelty and dramatics are over-exaggerated and in turn add to the humor of the play. He closes out his discussion with a comparison between A Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet, saying that the two plays show two very different depictions of love, one being a pure and doubtless love that is only destroyed by outside circumstances, families, and people, and the other full of confusing and volatile relationships. Isherwood restates that he highly enjoyed reading A Midsummer Night's Dream, but upon revisiting the work, was able to clearly see the separation of comedy and darkness. As for our personal opinions of the play, we both agree that while the plot was fun and exciting, with many twists, turns, and magical elements, there are many aspects of the story that are common to both old and modern writing. Love triangles and magical beings are widely overused today, but that likely may not have been the case at the time the play was written. A Midsummer Night's Dream has a good number of interesting and well-developed characters. There are enough of them to keep the story interesting without overwhelming the reader. The plot and the story are also very well thought out, with a lot of jokes and funny situations that pop up throughout the script to keep you entertained. Some people argue that the play does not have a climax, but that is widely up for debate. We also agree that it's nice to have a happier ending in contrast with the other works by William Shakespeare that we have read. While we were left unsure whether Demetrius's love for Helena was true or purely due to magic, the characters all ended up at a good place in the end, although the resolution of the story does not spark the same emotional reaction from the reader like that of Romeo and Juliet. For these reasons, we would rate A Midsummer Night's Dream above Macbeth, but about on par with Romeo and Juliet. It was a good read, and we would recommend it to anyone looking for a more light-hearted and fun form of writing from the Bard.